Hey Arden.
Hi.
Hi. Really excited to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, same here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It is a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn all about your work and how you help clients and this new program that you have coming up too. Would you,
Yeah, cool.
yeah, would you like to share a little about yourself before we dive in?
Sure. My name is Arden Leigh. I am the founder of Sacred Sirens. My cat wants to join us, apparently. This is
Awesome.
Virgil. He's my familiar. Virgil, if you're going to be in the interview, you have to be polite and look at the screen. Okay. If you want to do that, there you go.
Aw,
That's a little better.
love that.
he
Aw.
uh, he really likes being a part of my healing work. Apparently, I actually did a pet session, a pet psychic reading with Michelle Hawk, who you may be familiar, who because I know we just talked about knowing our mutual friend Catherine Bird in common, and
Mhm.
Michelle of course does the Shaman Sister podcasts with Catherine.
Yeah.
So, and she was the one who told me that Virgil really is into magic, is into witchcraft, wants to go down that path as well as I'm learning those things. And sure enough, like he'll sit when I'm doing a ritual. I was doing a ritual with a friend where it was just the two of us. So it was like north and south, we only had north and south, but Virgil went and sat like exactly west and like sat there for the whole ritual. And the only time he moved was when we were lighting a paper on fire to burn. And he tried to get it. I was like, no, we don't need your help lighting the paper on fire. You can keep sitting. But he was sitting through the whole thing. It was very cute. Um, so I guess as long as you're a yes to it, we might have some cat ears at the top of the video today. Um,
Aw.
anyway, before I was interrupted by my cat, um, I'm the founder of Sacred Sirens, which is the thought collective where I do my intuitive guidance work. My gift is in pattern recognition, reading the energy of a situation, and a very left brain kind of intuition. I do identify as an intuitive rather than an empath. An empath is one who um, feels everything that's going on in a particular situation and takes on that energy. For me, it's different. It's an understanding, and my feelings certainly are influenced by my understanding of the situation, but they're always my own. They're my reaction to something that's happening. I might feel sad because another person feels sad, but I know that it's my reaction to their sadness, rather than their own energy. So what I'm able to offer my clients is that they'll come to me with a situation, and I'll be able to look at certain details that they're telling me in their stories and be able to piece a larger pattern together from that and say, okay, it looks like if we look at detail A over here and detail B over here and look how that works together. Oh, and look how both of those also showed up in this other story you told me. And what can we do to identify this pattern? And if it's something that's causing a problem, to make changes and get better results next time. Whereas the the open like the open loop in the system that we can close up in order to get you on track to creating a lifestyle, a belief system that is sustainable and that is setting you up for success, for the goals that you want to manifest in your own life. And oftentimes that's with people's relationships. I do have a background as a dating coach, so I sort of made my transition into the coaching I do through Sacred Sirens, in terms of dating and especially achieving sacred union, not just being in a relationship for the sake of being in a relationship, but really working on uh, bringing everything that needs to be brought to the surface so that you can be the healthy partner that you need to attract the healthy partner that you want, that's going to create something sustainable in your life. But my work has branched out too, as I've had more people coming to me with questions about just how to manage their own bandwidth in their daily lives. How to creatively tap into the goals that they want, to be able to succeed in their careers, how to manage their relationships with their family members. So it's over the past year especially, it's it's branched out in a way that's really cool that I'm really grateful for. So that's primarily what I do through Sacred Sirens. I also have a band called Arden and the Wolves, and we just released our latest EP this past February. It's called Who Can You Trust? So what I also do there is, because the music I write, the lyrics especially that I write, are from my own personal situations and really from the heart. With this past album, I really knew that I owed it to myself and to my audience to start writing, writing songs that were a reflection of the values of really starting to take care of myself and to take care of my own life and to draw personal boundaries. And, prior to that, when I've been living in New York and working as a dating coach, it was very adventure driven, both my dating coaching style of, oh yeah, let's see what happens if I go and, seduce this guy and whatever, like what fun adventures can I have or what have you. And my songs were reflecting that as well. Unfortunately, it wasn't a sustainable lifestyle because I got hurt a lot. So for this next album, I really decided, I was like, well, I really owe it to myself and to my audience to start telling healthier stories. And that's going to start with my own decision on how I interpret events. So I wrote this album, and it really helped me transform my life, and especially to purge my trauma, to purge all the trauma bonding patterns that I had been engaged in before. So now, I also deal with teaching magic. And in terms of teaching magic, sometimes it's sort of as simple as taking control of the narrative that you're putting forth in your art can also bring about changes in your own life. So I would say those are kind of the pillars of the work that I'm doing currently in teaching. Teaching belief repatterning, teaching magic, and where the two of those intersect, and creating music that is in alignment with all of those beliefs, so that people can also there's a difference between, of course, watching a TED Talk and listening to a song. Both of them hopefully get in your mind. One of them hopefully also kind of gets in your bloodstream and can create that change. So sort of goes along with the other work as a supplement to that, I feel.
Yeah, totally.
That was a lot, sorry.
Yeah, and music and expression is so healing. For me, it's been so crucial to the healing process. Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Can you tell me a little more about what magic means to you?
Sure. Magic is kind of funny for me because I'm a skeptic. I'm a very open-minded skeptic. And in moving from New York and coming from a very, I live in LA now, as we were just talking about, but coming from New York and coming from this very masculine, very left-brain perspective, where I was where I was really behaving very dismissively of anything, regarding the occult, regarding the paranormal, because it didn't feel supported in that community particularly. I started sort of dabbling in magic a little bit back in New York, but there really wasn't a great deal of community around it there that I found at that time anyway. So in moving to LA, I knew, I was like, I've gone way too into my left brain. I've gone way too into my masculine, and I've shut off my ability to feel. In fact, I had shut off my ability to feel so much that looking back, I don't even know how I got that awareness of myself, because I was really just incapable of feeling what was going on in my body, because I'd had so much trauma that I'd suppressed for so long. And sometimes the way that we deal with trauma, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as well, is that, if something in our body hurts, we just repress it and we shove it down so that we can so we can survive, so we can get through with our daily lives. And in doing that, I was really, like I said, I'd really shut off my intuition. I'd shut off my right brain. I had shut off my ability to feel sensation even in my body. So when I moved out to the West Coast, that was definitely one of my intentions. And I also moved to the West Coast, and it was like, all right, I've been a dating coach for long enough that I know that the thing that I'm supposed to do moving out here is make sure that I have a social life of my own, that I don't end up depending on anyone. So the way that I got those two needs met at once was by starting to take witchcraft classes and just going on meetup.com and going to every pagan meetup, and classes that House of Intuition and the Green Man, which is in North Hollywood, which is where I ended up doing the bulk of my witchcraft training, I would say. And, you know, finding a basis for a social life and also learning a new skill. But I think, you know, the thing that's really important to me to emphasize is that I'm a very results-based person. And I think that being a skeptic for so long actually gave me a bit of an advantage in magic, because I'm really not the kind of person who's just going to go like dancing around a bonfire and howling at the moon for my own health. You know, it's like, if it doesn't work, if it's not showing me results, then I'm not really interested in it as purely an aesthetic or you know, something to do because it's cool. You know, especially in LA right now, witchcraft is incredibly trendy. There's all these people who are, you know, dressing all witchy and whatever. And I don't want to denigrate that, because even things as simple as clothing and donning the things that make us believe that we're in that story can be effective magical practices. But I know that for me, it wasn't worth it unless I was actually seeing results. And I started, you know, I started my own practice, and I started casting for intentions, launching sigils, and the whole 9 yards, and stuff started happening and started moving. So for me, magic is a practice of really intently curating my life. And for me in particular, this may not be magic's main function for everyone, but for me, coming out of being a dating coach, being a self-identified seductress, you know, being in that lifestyle really meant that I was often in reactivity to other people's desires, that I was molding myself to conform to their desires, and I was fulfilling their desires, and thereby attempting to, you know, even if it was a benign sort of emotional manipulation, attempting to add enough value to a person's life by matching their desires that they would not want to abandon me. They would want to actively work to keep me in their life. And I found that algorithm was faulty. that that there are people out there who will, even if they're given a golden goose that's laying them golden eggs, that they will choke that goose to death out of their own, you know, desire to self-sabotage, or their own shame, or their inability to handle that. So magic for me was a way of actually reclaiming my own desires and saying, if I'm going to spell cast for something, what is the thing that I want? And in focusing my own attention on the things that I want, and using magic as a way to propel those manifestations forward, it actually allowed me to create a life from my own center, rather than creating a life that was reactive to my not wanting people to abandon me, which is, you know, essentially, looking back at it now, was essentially enabling my own codependence. So magic for me is about creative power and manifestation from one's own center.
And what strikes me is the connection between creative power manifestation and healing also, and your own journey of healing from trauma and codependence. And
it's remarkable once you actually start seeing how your creative power works. You see all the places in your life where you had previously believed that you were powerless. You know, it's like the biggest step to embracing your own creative power is taking responsibility for your life, you know, for the results that you've manifested, which doesn't mean taking blame for those who have hurt you. You know, there's a lot of fine lines, especially in our current culture, with, you know, where does taking responsibility turn into victim blaming? And I'm really not interested in victim blaming, because I'm also really not interested in continuing to enable the people who are harming. So it's really a two-part thing. On the one hand, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, that people are being held accountable for their actions of harming others, that we're not looking and saying, oh, well, it was her fault because she was wearing a short skirt in a parking garage late at night or whatever. It's really important that we continue, you know, along with the cultural current of Me Too and things like that, to hold people responsible for those actions. At the same time, I think we also have to hold people responsible for complicity and for enabling. You know, Virgil apparently doesn't agree with that. You know, that does actually feel kind of kind of a harsh way of saying that, but I keep coming back to this really amazing article that I read on, it was like Womb of Light. I actually think I have it like on my phone here, so I can possibly give give credit. Yeah, womboflight.com. And it's like, what's going on with men? Yeah, what is it? What's going on with men? The mother wound as the missing link in understanding misogyny. And what they do is they give this really great list of bullet points at the end. It's directed to women, but I think we can all agree that, you know, the genders are a bit mutable here. You know, in terms of survivors versus assaulters. But it says here, as women, we must stop catering to their illusions that come from an ignorance of their own privilege, staying quiet to avoid conflict, internalizing their projections from their disowned pain, minimizing our feelings in their presence, accepting crumbs of respect instead of what we truly deserve, giving away our power in the form of emotional caretaking, and giving time and energy to men who refuse to do the inner work. And I keep coming back to that list over and over and over again and thinking about how we as women, or we as even, you know, the empath polarity in our dynamics, because of course men can be in this position too. We do need to take some of our power back and start saying, no, this is not okay. And it's hard when you've been gaslit out of your power for so many years to start from that. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I know that there will be reactions and there will be pushback. And how do you expect me to do this since if I've you know spoke up before, I got hurt, and all of these things have been conditioned into me. And I was absolutely in that same place myself 2 to 3 years ago. How can I possibly start speaking up about my trauma when I already have a trauma reaction just from from partners who punished me for having negative emotions? How am I supposed to trust anyone with talking about my problems when just opening up about it is already stepping into a trauma response? And the answer to that is just start slowly and find friends that you can trust, and find these tiny pockets of people that you trust to talk to, and work on it. And the unfortunate part about healing trauma is that, I like to liken this to the metaphor of having your house vandalized. If someone comes along and vandalizes your house, it is absolutely not your fault that someone vandalized your house. They did that. They did that to your house. But the thing is, they're not going to clean it up. And right now, as it stands, our justice system is not going to clean it up either. They might put that person in jail for vandalizing your house, maybe, if you're lucky, but they're not going to clean your house up for you. There is no system we have currently in our society that helps people restore their own houses after they've been vandalized. And if you look at, I kind of hate broken windows theory as a thing, because I think it's, it comes from, it's born out of some pretty racist beliefs. But the idea of broken windows theory, as cited in the book Freakonomics, is this idea that if you have a broken window in a building already, there's more likely to be crime there, because it's kind of like, if one window is broken, well, then what's another window, and then what's another, and it kind of builds up on top of each other. And the way that this relates to trauma is that those who are accustomed to experiencing trauma, especially in our childhoods, I'm like a 4 or a 5 on the adverse childhood experiences test. I have a lot of trauma from growing up as well. And it's like, if someone keeps breaking my windows, then I'm going to keep going through life. And if I don't repair those windows, then unfortunately other people are going to come along and keep breaking them. Because as we understand, people who have a higher score on the adverse childhood experiences test are more likely to experience trauma on and on in their lives. It's not fair. It's not cool. But unfortunately, I finally reached a point where I was like, this is the reality of the situation, and nobody's going to heal me but me. So, so I might as well do that. And magic for me was, I don't think I even realized it at the time, but magic was absolutely instrumental to my healing process, because as I started calling in all the things that I wanted, all the things that were not in alignment with the things that I wanted to manifest started coming up to be released. And I started realizing, oh, hey, if I want, a soulmate relationship, or if I want career success or whatever, I have to get rid of this belief. I have to get rid of this belief. I have to actually go back and start reprogramming myself. So I know this is kind of like, there's been like so many segues in this, and I'm kind of like, I understand I'm going on a lot, and feel free to interrupt me if it's if it's too much. But this is what I now teach in the course that I'm launching that begins this Sunday, July 1st, called the Repatterning Project. Is I teach people the process that I learned myself, pulling from multiple different sources in order to reprogram my own beliefs and start getting different results. Because I was just tired, I was like, I'm tired of being picked on. I'm tired of being abused. Why does this always happen to me? And at some point I had to look at that and say, even though it's not my fault, I still am the common denominator. So so that's what I'm really jazzed and energized about teaching now. Is I'm teaching, I'm excited to teach people, regardless of whether it's trauma or whether it's just their limiting beliefs. It doesn't have to be about sexual assault in Me Too. It could be about, a teacher telling them when they were growing up that they weren't good enough at art to pursue it, or, anything that limits you, anything that, anything that sticks with you as your imprinting and your programming is all stuff that can come up to be changed and adjusted to get you the results that you really do want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, changing those beliefs. And one thing that struck me about what you said, though, is like, I've had that realization before of like, oh, like this terrible experience happened. Like, how was I a magnet for that? And like, how would you change it from like looking at it like a negative? Like I was a magnet for that. Like something's messed up about me because I have all this trauma. Or, how do you deal with that so that you don't kind of turn against the self?
Yeah. Someone I was working with last year who was a shaman said this phrase that always stuck with me. He was talking about the abuse that I had experienced. And he said, you did not give permission for this to happen, but you allowed it. And that difference to me was like, oh, I didn't say, yes, this is okay. But I also didn't say, no, this is not okay. Mm-hmm. And it's, we are also like, this is where self-compassion and self-forgiveness comes in so much, because we have to understand that we're programmed to, as children, to not be able to say, this is not okay. Because we depend on our parents, we depend on our parents for our survival. If we were living in tribes still, we might depend on our parents for our survival until we were about 4 years old, and we could, kind of walk and get around and like shove food in our faces, and the whole village would take care of us. But in the society that we live in now, we're really reliant on these two flawed and sometimes fucked up people for our survival, and we don't have the ability to say no. So I think we have to look at that system. For me in particular, oh my gosh, I tried to emancipate myself from my father when I was 15 years old. And the court said no. The court was like, it was the mid 90s, and, there were kinds of abuse that were not being talked about. And when I came out and I was like, this is not okay. This is happening to me. I'm miserable. Like, please help me. Please get me out of here. The court system that I was in just didn't care. They were like, well, you're under the age of 18, so legally you can't decide which parent you stay with. And I'm like, the fuck are you, like, the fuck? I hope it's okay if I swear. But we have to look at that and say, I understand why I felt it was dangerous for me to set boundaries, because I tried to set a boundary when I was 15 years old, and I was publicly humiliated for it. I was humiliated in front of the court system, and I was humiliated in front of my father, who then like doubled down on his abuse because he got bolder once he saw that I tried and lost. So of course I felt that it was dangerous for me to say no, and that I was just going to dissociate and just deal with whatever happened, because that's how I dealt with my childhood. When my father would begin abusing me again after that, even I remember like my mom and her lawyer, trying to help me, like with the best of intentions, and saying, just block it out, just like block it out, just don't, like, it's not there, just block it out. And so I did that. And then of course that became my strategy, until I realized that saying just block it out was getting me into all of these horrible situations that were just escalating. And I was like, it's fine, I'll just deal with it. It's fine. And So I think we really can't blame ourselves for the patterns that we pick up from our parents that are not necessarily the best and healthiest ways of dealing with our lives and creating circumstances that are going to be conducive to our emotional health. Like, we have to forgive ourselves for that, because it wasn't our fault. Like, we were kids, we were kids and we learned that. But it's like, it's time for us to wake up and realize that we are adults now and we're no longer under the thumbs of our parents, and it's our responsibilities to reprogram ourselves, to repattern our own beliefs so that they do create happiness. But one of the things I like to say about self-blame is that the best motivator for me to not blame myself for things or beat myself up for things is just the fact that I know it's not effective. It's like, I know if I beat myself up, that's not going to get me the results that I want, It's
Mhm.
so if I ever hear that, I'm like, okay, I'm beating myself up. I was doing it last night. I was like, I was beating myself up for, something stupid, or like whatever anger and resentment I was like holding on to, and I was getting into a bad place. And I was like, okay, what do I need to like not do this? And I was like, I'll get stoned and put on an episode of Queer Eye, because like Queer Eye always makes me feel better. And if I'm watching that while I'm stoned, it's really going to like imprint, and I'm going to get out of that pattern. So sometimes, like, and I know I'm a very left brain person, but just being that analytical about it, it's like, this emotional response is not helping me. If I know it's not helping me, then I'm not going to want to do it. But it takes bringing that level of awareness to what you're doing to realize that it's not helpful. And for me, this is, again, it's just like, I'm so left brained. I will Jedi mind trick myself into any emotional state, by analyzing how I can get there. And of course it deals with my body too. It's like, yeah, last night I used cannabis in an episode of Queer Eye to get there because I knew the effect that would have on my body. But if I have to get to that place through my left brain by figuring out what I need to do to get my body into that state, then I'll do it. I overthink myself into not overthinking.
Yeah, that's so good. And like what would you say to someone who doesn't understand that, doesn't think it's possible? Because this is something I run into with clients a lot sometimes, is like I know how to get myself into that state, but they sometimes don't believe that it's possible.
Yeah. It's almost like it's that very belief right there that needs to change. If
Yeah.
that's the first step, if
Yeah.
you can say to someone like, well, hey, I understand it doesn't feel possible right now. I understand that you feel like you're in the depths of the pits of despair, and I get it because I've been there. I remember when it didn't feel possible either. But wouldn't it be great if it was possible? Like, let's say that there's a way that it's possible, and maybe you just haven't thought of it yet. And that's okay, because right now you're in a pit of despair, and despair is telling you it's not possible because despair wants you to stay there. But tell me this, would you want to feel better? Because you have to want to feel better. And if you want to feel better, then I can help you feel better. I can come up with some stuff that I can come up with some things that have worked for me, and we'll try them out one at a time. And if it doesn't work, then okay, or it could be that like right now you're in the pit of despair and despair wants to talk. Like, is it just that the despair hasn't been given a voice yet? That the anger or the rage hasn't been given a voice yet? Does this need to be heard and processed and purged before we get there? Then that's okay too. Then we'll take all the time that you need to do that. But you have to want to feel better. And like that was like the kicker for me, like the real sticking point for me before I opened up to a healing journey was I finally realized, I was like, I have to want to be happy more than I want to be right. And I have to want to be happy more than I want life to be fair, because life is not going to be fair first. And if I'm sacrificing my happiness for being right, then I'm right, but I'm still unhappy. And if I'm happy, I'm in a weird way, it's like if I'm happy, if I'm on the other side of it, I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be right anyway. you know like I'm going to be right when I change my mind,
Mhm.
essentially like that is going to follow me. So that's the important part. And I've been also, maybe you've seen on Facebook sometimes I've been like called in to intervene, where people are like, oh my God, but I'm so miserable, it'll never get better and whatever. And I'm like sometimes the worst person to do that intervention, especially like if that person hasn't actually hired me, because I'll step right in there and I'll be like, okay, it's never going to get better. Do you feel better now? Is that what you want? And it takes that step for them to be like, no, that's not what I want. Good. Okay. What do you want? Do you want it to get better? Yes, I want it to get better. Great. Now we have some place to work from, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth is, like, you got better, I got better, we're helping people get better. We've seen people get better all the time. And just because someone else can't see that right now, I understand where that totally feels true for them. That feels so true for them. And I empathize with that. And it's like so much of my work involves me going back and saying, if I could go back and talk to the Arden of 5 years ago, what could I possibly have said that would have gotten me out of that pit? And I have to think back to that. And sometimes, like, being in the state that we're in now, and we feel better, like we're great, you know, it can be hard to go back there. But it's, you know, it's precisely the fact that those memories are very, very deeply emblazoned in my mind, and I wouldn't want to forget those. I wouldn't want to forget what it was like, because I want to be able to help people get out of that same place too. And sometimes it's just a matter of slowing down and just, you know, helping to align them with where their desires are. And that can be tough in the moment. That can be tough. But I assume that if someone is already booking a session with me, they already want it. Like, they're already saying they want it. I actually don't run into that problem nearly as much with people who are my clients, because they're already committing to signing up and changing something. They might just need help seeing where it happens. I think another thing that's really worth saying is that, you know, when I was depressed, you know, there's a lot that goes around the internet these days about, oh, people say just deal with your mental illness by, you know, exercising and getting fresh air and eating veggies and fuck that, you know. But it's become such a meme to say, like, fuck that oftentimes I don't think that people are actually trying those things. Because, you know, I remember when I was doing that, and, you know, I'm like, when I was depressed, was I actually exercising and eating healthy, or was I just saying that it wouldn't work before I even tried it, you know? And I think that there has become this culture online of stop trying to pretend that you can just fix mental illness. And I get where that anger comes from, because no one wants their pain minimized. I certainly don't want my pain minimized. I don't want to be told that, you know, just some fucking vegetables and fresh air can fix the years of trauma that I've been through. But I also think it's turned into this thing where people don't really want to try the solutions that they're given, because there's so much of a support system currently available online for those who don't want to try. Wow, I just said that. I just went there. And it breaks my heart. You know, it breaks my heart. I want those people to be happy. I really do. And I also remember that there were times that I tried things like exercise and eating healthy in a way that was not a solution, because it was another way of beating myself up. It was another way of restricting my happiness and saying, like, I have to get up and go to this parkour class. I used to take parkour in New York, and you know, arguably signing up for parkour got me through a really difficult depressive episode in my life. But it also wasn't the healthiest way of dealing with it, because there was an element of self-loathing to it. There was an element of, if I'm powerful, if I take Krav Maga and parkour and I can jump over buildings and beat people up, then no one will hurt me. You know, then I wasn't good enough as I was before to avoid this pain. So therefore, if I toughen up more and I do more, then I'll avoid getting hurt again in the future. And of course, like, obviously that didn't work, you know? So it's like I was getting exercise, but it was still coming from not necessarily a place of belief that was conducive to helping me. Maybe if I had done something that felt really joyous, you know, like dance or something. But even then, I would have had to get into my body first, which would require shedding all of the dissociation. You know, it's like, these are so complicated. And this is why I really like working with people one-on-one, because it's like, I want to unpack all of this. Like, I want to get to the root of, like, why these things aren't working, you know? Yeah. So, but the first thing is, people really just have to want to be happy. They have to want to try it. They have to be willing to actually give it a shot and let it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Like, they have to fully commit to themselves and to making that change and taking responsibility for it. And along with that, it's kind of like it's like you want that and you also want them to like forgive themselves. So it's like taking responsibility for where they are and also having the self-compassion to forgive everything that went wrong up to now or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think those two things are really one and the same. You know, it can
Mhm.
sound like a contradiction, you know, taking responsibility and forgiving yourself. But really what it is it's just about a commitment to your own happiness and to not letting your past define you. And we say that a lot. We say, like, oh, I'm not going to let my past define me or whatever. But until we understand that we're living in a limited view of the world that has been limited by our past, we're not actually giving our sense a full sense of the possibilities of the future. And that's partly what's so important. It's like, you know, I give the metaphor of, what if you've lived in this small town your entire life and you think that every small town is exactly like this small town, and the whole world just looks like this place you grew up in. And then one day you climb the mountain that's at the edge of your town and you get all the way to the top of the mountain and you look around and you're like, oh my God, there's so many other places to live. There's so many other different ways of being. Like, that town over there has like a badass city hall, and, you know, look, that town over there has tennis courts, or like whatever, you know,
Yeah.
whatever whatever it is. It's really important for us to, you know, I look back and I'm like, oh man, how many times, you know, throughout my 20s did I hear that phrase, like, not letting your past define you? And I never knew what it meant, you know? I never knew what it meant until I could get an objective enough viewpoint to see what the other possibilities were for my life. It was like I was going to keep attracting people who took advantage of me and who abused me and who, you know, not just in my relationships, but even in some of my friendships, you know? I had a lot of toxic friendships, you know, throughout my 20s in New York, which is probably what you do when you're in your 20s in New York, you know, but and it takes that, you know, it takes that step to say, I'm going to remove myself from this situation. I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to really start to tune in and try to listen to my body for once in my life. And it's man, like I said, I'm not even sure how I knew at that point that that was what I needed to do. That's how shut off my body was. But there was just this like divine spark somewhere, like just this like light at the end of the tunnel that was like, whatever this is not good, and I can't feel my body anymore, and I somehow have to change that. And I think that being on the West Coast is actually going to help me to sensitize and to form better friendships. So sometimes it's like, even if that's all that you have to go on, you know, like, go with it. Like, if all you have is that tiny spark, like, just follow it. It may be a huge piece of divine guidance that, like, the universe is trying to scream in your ear. And in my case, I was even deaf physically, you know, like, I don't think it was legally deaf, but I definitely lost my hearing being in New York and being on medication that compromised my hearing. And I think also it was probably from, like, you know, a lifetime of dealing with verbal abuse. My brain kind of like shut off my access to it probably had nothing to do with my ears, you know, or very little anyway. I think some of it was probably like how my brain registered hearing or whatever. It's like the universe like screaming and being like, get out of New York, move to LA, you know, like, do something, like, you're gonna die. You know, I had like 2 cancer scares in my last years there. I was like getting biopsies and all this stuff. I was like, oh my God, if I don't kill myself, like, this city is going to kill me for me, you know? So whatever it is, that tiny spark, you just gotta follow that sometimes, because that's where the wisdom is.
Mm. What would you say to someone who, well, A, has a hard time hearing that voice of intuition and is so caught up in self-blame for the past, a lot of regret for all the years spent making so-called mistakes or, you know, just, yeah.
Yeah.
What,
You know, there's this fascinating study that I read about in some journal of psychology several years ago. And it was about how sometimes cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a subset group of people that not only does CBT not work for them, it actually fucks them up even worse, because they're so highly self-critical that the idea of CBT, which is like, take responsibility for your actions and what you're creating in your life, actually um, it actually hurts them. It actually it actually turns into that self-blame and regret and that spiral that is actually not serving them. And the researcher who looked into this created something called compassionate mind training. And it's essentially like, there's a whole article written on it, and I won't get into the whole thing, but the concept behind it is like, it sounds silly when I say it like this, but it's about sort of creating an imaginary friend to be that compassionate voice in your mind, to counteract all of the negative self-talk that you have going on. And it can be like a person, a figure. It can be like your deceased grandmother, if that's someone who really resonates like that for you. It can be like a character you saw in a movie. It can be an animal. It can be a tree. It can be the ocean. It doesn't matter. It can be literally anything, you know? And the trick is to really mindfully install that other voice to talk to you the way that a loving best friend would, so that when that negative self-talk steps up, you have that voice there to go like, you know, if I'm like, oh my God, I lost my keys again, I'm such a dizzy bitch or whatever, that voice is like, you're not a dizzy bitch, you're really busy today, and you put your keys down somewhere and forgot about it because you were thinking about something more important. It's okay, I love you, you're gonna find them, they didn't walk out of the house. Just take a deep breath and retrace your steps. You know, like, you have that voice there to really, to be like, hey, you know, don't treat yourself like this. Like, it's that idea of, it's basically taking that adage of, we would never talk to our best friend the way that we talk to ourselves. So it's like installing our own best friend voice in our head. And that's something that we can actively do, that we can work on, that we can like journal about. You know, that's again, like, it's an installation. You know, it takes practice. It's not going to happen just the first day that you start doing it. Maybe it will, you know, who knows? But if it doesn't, you know, it is about putting that into a mindful practice and having that voice there ready for you to start supporting you. And then doing that every day, you know, journaling about it, whatever it takes to make that, to solidify that and make that a reality. That's really going to help going forward, because as we know, you know, and this comes back to me being super left brain and super logical about getting results, beating ourselves up is not going to get us the results. So if it's like, if I have to create an imaginary friend in order to get the results that I want, I'm like, bring it on, Roger. You know, like, whoever it is, you know, it's again, it's like, we do these things because we have to be willing to try them. We have to be willing to try what works. And so far that has worked pretty well for me. And now I'm able to sort of sit down with that voice and also like go through discernment and go through accountability. Sometimes that voice says to me like, hey, Arden, like, well, if you really want to fix this, like, where are you maybe creating these dynamics in your life? Is there anything that you are empowered to do right now that you could change and start getting better results, like, immediately? What could you do to feel better right now? Like, you know, but it's like, again, that voice isn't like beating me up for it. You know, I've now trained it. I've now trained it to help me with discernment in a way that feels good and that doesn't feel like I'm just shame spiraling or whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's a fascinating article. If you ever find it, it's like super long and dry, but I'm super into long and dry things. So that sounded dirty. Sorry. But yeah, I'm super into long, dry reading material if it gets me the results that I want. But if you look up compassionate mind training, I think you'll find it. There's a PDF of that article online, and it's I find it to be super helpful. But the TLDR is just make an imaginary friend in your head to talk to you nicely.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you have a spiritual perspective on trauma, such as like looking back on events and everything happens for a reason, or just how you, do you bring that in to your work at all? Or like, what's your perspective on it? Like, sometimes a client might be like, I can't understand like why all that should happen to me. Like, it's just too painful. It doesn't make any sense. And like helping them make some sort of like, have some sort of understanding or gratitude or appreciation for their journey, no matter what it is.
Yeah, that's something that's infinitely easier for me to do for myself rather than for another person, because as I'm sure you get, you know, creating meaning out of someone's events is like, that's for them to do rather than for me. But I find that sharing my own has been helpful. And I've also shared, you know, the process around releasing my album was just, you know, it was just so such a powerful thing that happened for me. I recorded this album, and the album was fully written. It was, it was done in theory. All the music and lyrics were written by July 2016. And from there, I had to, record and, get, additional production and, mixing and mastering and whatever. But the writing of the album was done July 2016, before the Me Too hashtag movement came out. And when the Me Too hashtag hit, and throughout that fall, as I kept recording, and I finally listened to all 5 songs on the EP in a row one night to really hear like the final. I was like, this is it. This is like the finished product. And I'm like listening to it. And I looked at the artwork and the album artwork. The album is called Who Can You Trust? And it's me with a pair of man's hands around my neck like this. And I didn't really realize this at the time. This was coming from, my subconscious, really. It was something that felt like it was coming through me rather than something I was consciously creating. But I have been the victim of choking in a domestic violence situation. It's the one situation where someone actually laid a hand on me in a way that was, was it with the one, or was it the biggest? It was at the very least the biggest. I look back and I'm like trying to discern whatever, but, but it was a big point for me. And the metaphor for me with this choking happening on the album artwork, and the album's called Who Can You Trust, is it's like, if I'm going into these relationships full of surrender, full of BDSM, full of these dynamics that are supposed to be fantasy. Well, is it fantasy or is it reality? Can I trust this person to choke me in bed responsibly to get us both off? Or am I going to end up actually being choked for real? Like what's real? Who can you trust? And looking back at that, and I was like, oh my God, I just made Me Too the album, apparently, without even knowing it. Like before Me Too even happened, it was like, it's literally called Who Can You Trust? And we're looking at like our entire society right now being like, who can we trust? Maynard James Keenan was just accused of raping a 17-year-old girl. Slightly different, but still pretty bad. Last night on Twitter, and it's hitting all the news today, and everyone's like, "Oh, do we have to hate Tool now? Like, do we, like, whatever? We're losing all of our heroes." That is the zeitgeist. And if I had not been through what I'd been through, there's no way that I could be a voice for that movement. Just today, my friend Leonore, you might know Leonore if you're in the Bay Area. Leonore Chia, she, tagged me in a post because someone in a spiritual community that she was familiar with, had released this kind of half-ass apology about these accusations that had come forward. And she was like, I'm listening to Arden Leigh's album now, like as a way of helping me process my feelings around this or whatever. I'm paraphrasing, but that was like, essentially what she was saying. And I was like, wow, I feel great. Like it feels amazing to be on the other side. And if I didn't have an understanding of these dynamics and how this works in our society, I would still be in shadow, I would still be in that space of not knowing. I would still be in the space of, the dudes out there, or, I'm not a man. So it's like, I might be like one of those white women who voted for Trump, I don't think it would be that bad, but like, I would be ignorant if I didn't have an understanding of the fact that those things are real and that those things happen, and that there are voices out there that we are marginalizing, that we are oppressing, that we are not allowing to come to the surface, and that there's a lot of pain that happens that people are not comfortable to talk about. There's so much pain that happened to me that I'm not comfortable talking about, and I talk about fucking everything, as you probably have discerned by now. So I'm like, if this could happen to me, if there was pain that I was repressing, then I really have an understanding of how bad it is, and I can create things that are going to help people going forward. Now, not everyone who comes to me or to you as a client is going to have a destiny as a healer, and that's okay. Some of them just want to live their lives, and some of them just want to to just go about their business and be happy and just have a normal life and a normal job. And that's perfectly fine. And in that, they can still see the value of understanding the truth of the situation and understanding, what it takes to look at the horrors of the world and still choose love and still choose healing. And I just watched the Netflix special last night, It's a comedy show by Hannah Gadsby, and it's called Nanette. And there's just so much there's parts of it that like they're not even jokes, and she goes so hard talking about trauma, talking about responsibility, and talking about the responsibility of society to stop marginalizing these voices, and why she needs to actually stop doing comedy in many ways, because comedy was I'm like getting chills as I'm saying this. Comedy was conducive to her reliving the most traumatic points of her life over and over again, without catharsis, without healing, just for a punchline, you know? And she was like, I've got to start owning my own story. I don't think after 10 years of this, I don't know what else I'm going to do. I didn't really have a backup plan, but I've got to stop. I've got to stop doing this, you know? And I think that, yeah, I just think that really comes back to whatever it is, the reason, you know, why did this happen to me? You know, why me? It's really hard to it's really hard to find meaning in that for someone. Like it's hard to prescribe anyone else a meaning for that. They've really got to find their own, you know, what is the way that this makes sense? What have I actually gained out of this? Who have I actually helped? Have I actually, just by realizing that this was wrong, have I stopped my lineage of generational trauma? You know, it's like maybe all this bad stuff happened to my dad and his dad and his dad and his dad and his dad too. And that wasn't fair to them either. But the only difference with me is that I realized it was wrong. And if I realize it was wrong, I have the burden of holding all of that dissonance, you know, because when we realize that something's happening to us and we don't realize it's wrong, in a weird way, we just kind of keep going. We're like, meh, I'll get through this. I'll shrug it off or whatever. But when we sit with that and we're like, this is wrong, this is not right, we can actually be the ones to heal our lineage and say, I'm not going to pass this down to my kids. I'm not going to do the same thing because I know that what was done to me was wrong, and I'm not going to do that to anyone else. And so at the very, very, very least, even if we don't plan on having kids or having a family or whatever, we can come back and say, I'm not going to stand for this behavior in the world. I'm not going to stand for it from myself. I'm not going to treat other people this way. I'm going to find healthier alternatives. And for me, it's like, it's not fair. Like, it's not fair that all this shit happens to us. But as this woman, that's what I was going to say, as this woman in the comedy special, Hannah Gadsby said last night, she says, there is nothing stronger than a broken woman who has rebuilt herself. And I'm so much stronger than I would be if I had never experienced this. I look at some people who've just like grown up with like a trust fund, you know, they're like grown up with a silver spoon and they have like so much stuff just handed to them, and their parents are like, they're just fine, you know, but like they just go through life and they just kind of, sometimes it feels like they don't even appreciate it. You know, they haven't been to those depths. I can't date anyone who hasn't been through some serious shit in their life because they don't understand. They don't have that level of understanding. And it's a bittersweet price to pay. But at the same time, we do have that appreciation and that capacity to bring in that much more joy in our lives because we have seen the darkness. I know that's a cliche, but I really feel that it's true. I'm so excited about the stupid, simple shit nowadays. I'm like, I have a balcony garden. It makes me so happy. I'm so happy that I have my own space. I have an apartment that I love, you know, it's like I have my art on the walls behind me. It's like I love sitting here and doing a Skype with you and having my beautiful home in the background. And I created this myself. I created this because when I was in New York, I had a roommate who bounced 6 months worth of rent checks. And, I had to go at housing court literally on like the day I had my book party that night. I was like at housing court at 8 a.m. that morning. And then like at 8 p.m. at night, I was like having to go out and like give a talk about my new book. I was like, this is like the worst thing. It's like the worst. But now that I've been through that and I've created something that's mine and that's safe and that has boundaries around it, I'm the only one on the lease now. You know, it's like I made the sacrifices that I had to make in order to have my own space, and I appreciate it so much more. There's so much joy in things like that. So I really do believe that it carves out a capacity in us to feel more, and that people who have been through shit are like the happiest when they get over it because they know, because they understand. And, I can't make anyone else's meaning for them, but I can say for me personally, I can't believe I'm saying this at this point, but I'm like, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't trade it for the world, because if I got myself out of that shit, I'm like, now everything is easy. Now it's like, if I survive that, everything else that I'm creating for myself now, you know, should feel like a piece of cake. It's like now I'm working on, really solidifying my business. Now I'm working on turning myself into a serious musical artist. Now I get to do the fun shit. If I could get through that healing, if I could get through all of that, and I could get to this other place, and I've seen how much success that I've had with that, and I'm like, fuck, I did it. Here I am. I'm like, wow, well, what's next? What's next is creating a life that I love. And that's wonderful. I really get to be at choice, and I really get to be in my power now. And I would just hope for people who are in that space of, why me? Why did this happen to me? I would hope, that they can hear that I get it. I've felt those exact same things too. And, in a weird way, like sometimes your trauma gives you your superpowers. It's true of every superhero story. Every superhero starts off with something terrible happening to them. And I hate romanticizing pain in that way. And yet, here I am, so it can get better if we choose it to.
It's a beautiful message. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share about your program? We're almost at an hour, and
Yeah, we're almost there. Well, I would love if anyone feels called to work with me. You can check out my website at sacredsirens.com, and specifically the program that begins this Sunday is sacredsirens.com/the repatterning project, all one word. So yeah, there's more details about it there, or if they want to reach out to me on Facebook, shoot me a message. I'm happy to tell them about the details. I will be doing it again in the future, but since this is the first time that I'm presenting it, this is kind of the test run. I am offering it at a price that is much lower than it's going to be in the future. So I really encourage people who want to be in this container where we actually even get to figure out what is needed, where I get to talk to people along the way and say, hey, is this helpful? What else is need? What else do you guys need? Like, what else is working? In addition to the curriculum that I've already set aside ahead of time and formulated, I would really encourage them to reach out to me, and let's see how we can make you a part of that. Because I'm really excited about it. It's already blossoming a lot. It hasn't even started yet. We've already got the Facebook group up of people who are ready for the program, and even the ideas that are being exchanged there right now are really exciting and inspiring to me. I'm super stoked. So I would love people who feel called to join that container while it's still in this really exciting blossoming stage.
cool. And is it for men and women? Or
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, this one is for everybody. So yeah, this is really, even though trauma will necessarily be a part of the discussion, I didn't want to make this trauma specific necessarily, because I believe that even if we don't believe that we have any trauma, maybe we do and we just haven't faced it, but even if we don't, we all have beliefs that we could optimize to serve us better. So it really, while trauma falls under that headline, certainly, I wanted to make it more accessible, more accessible to everyone, because we could all stand to. It's kind of like, the beliefs that we acquire are like we're running an operating system, and we're we've got these apps running in the background that are taking up our energy and our bandwidth. And we may not even be aware that those apps are running and taking up our energy and bandwidth until we really look into defragmenting our computer, So this is what it is. This is a belief defragmentation process, and going in and doing that work and really questioning everything that we believe, and right now figuring out how those beliefs are either serving us or not serving us. I really believe that, beliefs are something that, we may hold them to be true, but really, since so many different people believe different things, really objectively, we have to look at our beliefs and say that we opt into these things, even if we think that we don't. There are people who were raised in, certain households that will take on those religious beliefs and they will swear up and down that they're true. But if they weren't raised in that household, if they were raised in a different household, would they? So we have to look at that and at least admit that we can't necessarily always be objective about the things that we believe are true or not. And once we accept that belief, that our beliefs are something that we can opt into or not as we so choose, then we can begin the process of discerning and saying, are the beliefs that I'm choosing right now creating the life that I want to create? And if they're not, then what belief will create the life that I want to create? And how can I assimilate that belief into my mind? What are the ways that I can start incorporating this belief that that I am abundant, that I deserve money, that I don't have to put up with a partner who's gonna choke me against a wall, whatever it is, what are the beliefs that I need to create the life that I want, and start manifesting that really from the inside out. It is truly an inside job, but you'd be just amazed at how much outside results you can get from that inside job. And that's what I'm excited to teach people. So thank you for letting me talk about that today. It's really been a pleasure. It's been a fun conversation. I know I talk a lot because I have so much information about that, but I hope that, we covered everything that you wanted to cover. If there's anything that we didn't, I'm happy to get to that too, if you want to.
Okay. Do you have a time limit for today though?
Not particularly, to be honest. I wanted to make sure that I had the hours set aside, but everything else I have to do today is not on a particular schedule. I've already dealt with my scheduled client calls. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, if you have more, we can keep going. If it feels in flow, I'm always like, why not?
Yeah, I love the topic of magic and manifestation, and I'm really passionate about the association, with the relationship between healing trauma and manifesting the life that you want. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that some more. For me, there was one that was really super direct, in 2016, right around Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, I launched a sigil for healing trauma, because I had seen something happen where I I felt that someone in my life got triggered, and I was upset that maybe I had, somehow inadvertently, unconsciously done harm by triggering something in this, and so I looked at that, and, in the practice of magic, this is kind of a less nuanced belief than what I currently hold. But the sort of very basic belief in doing magic and making sure that you're being ethical with your magical practice is you never want to do work on another person without their permission. You can do work on the connection between you and another person, because that's an energy that is its own sort of entity. So at the time I was like, I'm just going to launch a sigil to heal all the trauma that's going on in this. And it was really funny, because then I look at that and all my trauma came up immediately after. It was like boom. It was like right away. It was right away that started happening. And that's the funny thing about magic sometimes too, is that sometimes it gives you what you need without you're necessarily being conscious that is what's happening. And that's also the way that magic will teach you magic as you are working with it, even more than a teacher could. Your results will teach you how it works way better than anything you could learn in a class, which is quite exciting. But I did that, and then all this stuff started coming up. So and from there, I really surrendered to that process, because I was like, well, once the can of worms has been opened, I want to just do it. I'm just not, there's no going back. And I was like, fine, that was a choice, obviously, but I felt that it was the right choice for me. And from there, I remember also just the power of intention setting. It was just, incredible to me, because the next intention I set, when I realized, I was like, all this trauma has come up for me. I cast this spell, all this trauma is coming up now. And now um, now I just want to get through this. Like, I just want to get to the other side because I hate this. It's miserable. I feel like I'm just getting like punched in the face over and over and over again. And it's like, this just sucks. It's all this gross trauma stuff coming up for me, and it's not fun. So I set an intention, and I kind of made it an agreement with the universe. And I basically said, look, I'm willing to do all the work around this. I don't want to cut any corners. I'm not looking to, not looking to skip any of the work. And I promise that I'll stop saying, are we there yet? Like, I'll stop, because that's just another way of being in resistance. Like, stuff would open up and I'd be like, this is the mother lode. Like, this must be it. And then following week, nope, here's more, here's more, here's more. And I was finally like, okay, fine. I'm going to stop asking, are we there yet? And I'm going to just say, like, just like, let's just get this done. And I'm willing to buckle down and do the work and do as much work as needs to happen. And, but like, treat me like the straight A student that I am. Like, put me on the fast track, because I know I've always been a smart kid. I've always been someone who's picked up stuff very easily. So put me on the fast track, and let's just get this done. Like, let's knuckle down and let's get it done. Well, within about a month of my setting that intention, someone in my life came forward and offered to give me access to some plant medicine ceremonies that they were running for free. And I ended up having these, like, how did that happen? I know how it happened, but it was like, that was what I asked for. And the universe was like, okay, you're willing to do the work and you want to get it done quickly and you're not going to cut corners. All right, then let's give you something that's really going to allow you to quantum leap lifetimes in a single night. And sure enough, I would go into ceremony and I would really sit there with, the stuff that I needed to work on and bring up. And it worked. It was like, because I did that, it's one of those things where, of course, as you set an intention, but it has to be able to manifest in the 3D, so it's not like, oh, let's just get this over with. Like, that's, like, just skip over it or skip through, or, oh, this is going to happen really fast. But what the universe did send me was someone who was willing to sponsor my healing journey with a really accelerated track, of doing these ceremonies where I could make these huge quantum leaps in a single night. So that for me is part of how magic kind of intersected with my trauma healing journey. I also got a ton of signs and synchronicities. When I started this journey, there were other things around this that also kind of intersected with this kind of starting out. But in surrendering to my path and no longer using magic to try and just like manifest these kind of low grade, physical material things, by really aligning with my healing and aligning with my purpose, the universe started really showing up really loudly for me. Just like, my friends laugh all the time when I show them, like, oh, look at this sign, look at that sign. They're like, holy shit, Arden, you're always getting the craziest synchronicities. Like, stuff that there's certain people who like didn't believe in magic at all. And I would show them stuff and they'd be like, okay, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, I have no explanation for that, or whatever. And I'm just like, I'm like, yeah, I see stuff like this like every week, which is, again, what's so lovely about coming from the background of being a skeptic, is that I think that when I entered magic at all, there was a big part of me that was like, I want this to work. I'm open-minded. I'm coming into it with a really pure heart because I want this to work. I'm not coming into this being like, oh yeah, prove it to me, because spirit's not going to align with that, as you probably know. But coming into this and saying, I want this to work. I'm in cooperation. I'm going to do my part. But yeah, I'm not just going to jump around a bonfire and howl at the moon for my own health. I need to see stuff. Spirit really makes things quite clear. It really made things quite clear to me. And there were definitely decisions I made along this path that, had my tarot cards not told me what was happening, I'm not sure I would have had the bravery to make those decisions on my own, because I wouldn't have been able to see the possibility that was outside of that. So magic has absolutely been a huge part of that journey. And again, it's also about calling back your creative power, because when you start doing shit and shit starts working, it's like, wow, with great power comes great responsibility. I one of the songs that I wrote on my album was designed to expose my ex's pattern of harm, not even through me. And sure enough, 6 weeks after I wrote that song, um, you know, there was an essay that got published about his harm and his hypocrisy, and he started, losing work after that. There was also, some work of his that was leaked. He was a creative, and there was a work of his that was leaked in a way that was kind of showing his internal misogyny and sexism. And he started losing work after that. And I was like, on the one hand, I was like, okay, cool. Like that was justice. That's just me exposing the truth about someone. I'm not binding their free will to anything. I'm just saying, like, let's bring everything that you swept under the rug. No, we're going to bring that to the surface so that you have to deal with that and heal. But after that happened too, I was like, wow, if I could do that, cool. That was a necessary step of healing on my journey. But what else can I do? What else can I do that's now going to fix this problem? What else can I do that's going to solve this now, rather than just, creating from a place of hurt or rage or chaos or whatever it is. I really want to, when you see stuff start working, you realize how much you really want to be accountable to your own shit, because you want to be creating in the world for good. At least I do. I guess, if you don't, then, that's how you get like all the alt-right guys on the chaos magic forums with Pepe the Frog and everything like that, sigilizing Trump into office. But for me, certainly I want to create from a place of healing and harmony. I want to be that beacon of what kind of love is possible in the world. So if that means getting out all the negativity, then great. That's what I did with the album. I got everything out. But now it's time to create from a place of harmony. And yeah, that's where I'm trying to go with that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a question around fully inhabiting the body, because you talked about earlier on about the tendency to check out and avoid the feelings and sensations that were uncomfortable. And I know a lot of trauma survivors have this sort of like up and out experience of disassociating and not being able to be fully inhabiting the body.
Yeah.
And to manifest, we've got to be able to pull that, imaginal realm all the way down to the root chakra and manifest in the physical. So yeah, any advice there?
Yeah. I always tell people start with the coming attractions at the movies and looking at a menu in a restaurant, because those are the easiest two ways in my experience to discern what your body wants. And if you look at a menu in a restaurant and there's like immediately something that jumps out to you, like ooh, I want that. Like that looks good. That sounds delicious. For me, it's like a lobster club. If there's ever a lobster club on a menu anywhere, I'm just ordering it. It's just a done deal, Or if you go to the movies, you might see the coming attractions for the next movies that are coming out. And, you see one or two where you're like, that looks boring. And I think I'll be washing my hair that night, whatever. And then you see one, you're like, oh my God, I have to see that right away when it comes out. And that's like, those two things for me are the training grounds that I give people to start practicing their own emotional self-awareness and discernment. That's like the difference between their yes and their no. The difference between like a lobster club and like liver and onions for me, or like, the difference between, the trailer for Coco versus the trailer for like the latest, I don't know, Jason Statham movie or whatever. It's like sometimes we have to really hone in on the things that are that obvious, and then we can start applying that everywhere. Then we're like, hey, my friend is inviting me out tonight. Am I a Coco about that, or am I a Jason Statham movie about it? It's like, I might love my friend, but I really don't feel like going out tonight, and I want to honor what my body says and say, hey, I love you. I wish I could be there for you, but my body is really calling me to stay indoors or whatever. The more, for me, it comes back to the metaphor of my hearing. Like when I lost my hearing in New York, like even to this day, I still have to sort of lean in and say like, what's that sometimes, like, sorry, or whatever, because I'm still partly deaf. sometimes I have to do the same thing with my body as well. If I start to like feel a sensation, sometimes I'm like, what's that? What's that, body? What are you saying to me? Like, it's that leaning in and listening and really like quieting everything else so that we can start to discern that. And the better we get at that, the better things become, and the more we sensitize. And that's why stupid shit like, my balcony garden can make me so happy now, because I actually have learned to feel how that feels. I've learned how to enjoy things for myself. But one of the problems that was so difficult for me in my codependent relationships was that I had been dissociating so long that I couldn't feel pleasure either. I couldn't feel pain, and that was a problem. So I ended up with people who were hurting me because I couldn't tell the difference. But I also couldn't feel pleasure. And that sort of manifested as this sort of like, I didn't understand what it meant to do things for myself. I remember like my mom would always be like, well, why don't you just do something nice for yourself? And I'm like, what, Mom? Like a fucking bath? Like, I don't understand what that is. Like, you keep saying do something nice for myself, but nothing feels good, And I didn't realize why that was at the time. I was like, oh, nothing feels good because I can't feel anything. So therefore, I keep constructing my life to look good to everyone else so that they'll value me and they'll stop hurting me and they won't abandon me. If I have a nice apartment where people can come over and I can pour them a glass of wine, and I treat them well, then maybe they won't hurt me because they'll like coming over and having a glass of wine with me. Maybe if I have, a beautiful apartment, then the guy I'm dating will think that I am beautiful too, because he'll be seeing me in this beautiful environment, which is actually something that is true. It was a study that was, that was how like in my left brain I was like, let me set up all the possible odds for people to just love me, and if I do everything that science says makes people love you or value you or support you. That's why I was learning NLP. Like I was like, let me learn how to establish rapport with people and persuade people to my side and blah, blah, blah. So I was constructing this life that was like entirely what it looked like on the outside, because I wanted to invite people into a world that they would value. But meanwhile, I wasn't enjoying that world myself. I would have bath bombs on my, my bathroom shelf or whatever, but I wouldn't use them if no one was there, because it was like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one sees it, it doesn't count. Like my own internal experience of the world doesn't matter, And when you're treating yourself like that, it just comes through. Like I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I wasn't fooling anybody. I was like the most insecure person who was taking on all the trappings of success and confidence. And I look back and I'm like, I don't think anyone was fooled, because I was quite obviously so unhappy. And I was trying really hard to fix my unhappiness, but I was trying to fix my unhappiness by looking like I was happy or looking like I was successful, being like, people aren't going to want to be around me if I look unhappy all the time. So I'll just create this life that honestly is not designed for me. It's designed for other people. So it's really hard when you can't feel your body to understand the things that make you happy, to understand the things that that keep you in that state of positivity, in that state of equilibrium. Because if you can't feel it, then you can't access it, So if you really start with those simple exercises of what do I like on the menu and what movie do I want to see from the coming attractions, that's like your way of starting to slowly tune into what your body is saying again. Because they're for me, they're the two most obvious examples I've come up with. And then you start applying that to everything in your life. What do I like on the menu? Okay, what do I want to do with my afternoon? What's the menu that I have set up for my evening tonight? I could hang out with a friend. I could go out to a party. I could go do some work. I could whatever, what's going to feel good. And then of course you get to the advanced player setting of that, where you're like, okay, it's going to feel good if I hang out with a friend tonight, but it might feel even better if I do some work tonight that results in, my getting some more signups for my class. So I'm going to take care of not only short-term me, I'm going to take care of long-term me too. It's that same thing with like, you might get up in the morning and you don't want to go to work today. And if you listen to your body, you might, hit snooze and, call in sick and skip work like every day of your life. Well, that's listening to your body short term, but listening to your body long term is what it means to actually set yourself up in a career that you enjoy and something that you're going to want to get up and do every day. And when you start making that plan to do that, then it gets easier. You know, it gets easier even like waking up for your shitty job or whatever, because you know that there's more hope on the horizon. You're like, I'm going to my shitty job today, but I'm setting aside the money from my shitty job to actually invest in my future and do what I want to do. I'm planning long term as well. So that's how you use that emotional self-mastery to start tuning into what you need and what you want and the future that you're setting yourself up for.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I
I
love
worked
it.
hard. I worked so hard at it.
Yeah. Awesome. Hmm. What do you have to say about like finding safety, and especially like for sexual trauma survivors, and just like feeling safe to slow down and feel, and also safe to have new experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one for sure, because that feeling of unsafety can really kind of permeate, you know, and it can feel like nothing is safe anywhere. And I get that, especially in the world we live in, because right now we're actually deconstructing everything that is unsafe about our society, and we're doing that on a mass level. And there's backlash, you know, of course. In a weird way, I look at that and I say, in many ways, you're right. We are bucking the tide. But in many ways, I also, this is me creating meaning out of my own story, but I'm like, I was born in this time for a reason. I went on a trauma healing journey at the start of 2016 so that I could be present for this movement, you know? Um, uh, oh, did I previously say I'd finished writing my album in July 2016? It was July 2017. It was just like a couple months before the Me Too hashtag appeared.
Mhm.
I just I just said 2016. I realized where I think I misspoke before. So I'm just going back and correcting that. No big deal. Um, but, you know, I look at that and I make meaning out of it. And I'm like, I was meant to heal this trauma and, and record this album and create this course, this program for people, because that is what is needed right now. I am living in a Trump presidency because my voice is needed right now in the collective. There are so many voices that are needed right now in the collective. It sucks, but I'm just going to assume that, because this is the belief that makes me happier, I'm just going to assume that, you know, I'm kind of, you know, an alien on a mission who was sent to Earth to transmute this energy specifically and to help like lead people out of that. Whether that's true or not, I'm not really worried about, because I'm not going to find the answer to that until I die, or you know, until perhaps you know the. Oops, I'm getting some feedback. Sorry. Um, until you know, yeah, until I die, or until the aliens come and tell me that, yes, you are one of us, and that is why you're here. And I don't care. I don't care if it's true or not, because it gives me a sense of purpose about my mission. It gives me a sense of purpose about, it just makes things feel better. And if it makes me feel happier in the meantime, then it's working for me. And again, that's a belief that is, you know, creating that. So I want to go back to your original question, which was, hang on, remind me of that again.
Finding safety in the body.
Right. Cool. Thank you. I love how you asked me a question about finding safety in the body, and I'm like, well, I decided I'm an alien. But you want to start small. And what I found for me was that we are creating these pockets of safety in this new paradigm, that there are now people who are coming together and talking about these issues and making sure that there are safe spaces for people to be heard and to exchange their stories. And I think especially what's so important for me, what has been so important for me on this journey, is that I really started holding my relationships to the standards of my friendships. First, I raised the standards for my friendships, and I started saying, all right, I want to have friendships where I can feel safe to talk about things, you know, and that was something that was not too difficult, because there's a lot of people in the world, you know, there's a lot of people that we vibe with, and we naturally want to be friends with people that we feel safe with, even if in the past we have been betrayed by people that we maybe felt safe with at the time, you know, we can learn and grow and be better and be more discerning and look at people's actual like actions and look at their other friendships that they've maintained too and see those red flags when we see them. Once we start creating better friendships for ourselves and having those pockets of safety within our friendships, we can actually start to carry that energy into our relationships and into the people that we date as well. And for me, you know, I was single. Well, I've been single, but I was, you know, I remained pretty much single throughout my entire trauma healing process. Not really on purpose. I think if there was a relationship that presented itself that felt right at the time, that I would have gone for that. It wasn't something that I specifically shut down as a rule. But what was so helpful about it is that it was really this period where I was like, wow, nobody in my dating pool right now meets my standards. And that's a great sign because it means that I'm growing. You know, it means that I'm growing and I'm, you know, going to start attracting new people. And of course, I can't expect the people who were, you know, in my dating pool before to rise up with me unless they are also doing the work on themselves, you know, in which case I'll see it and we might still be in alignment as we continue to go. There were certainly friendships where that happened for me as well, where it's like you have two people who maybe started out in some pretty toxic places. You know, I had people, you know, I had people who I was afraid I was going to lose them as friends because I had to, you know, do the work on myself and separate myself from anything that was going to hold me in a toxic dynamic. And I looked at some friends who were like really lovely people, but who really enabled my codependency, who were like, oh, he's going to come around. Like it's just around the corner or it's just whatever, you know, in a way that I was like, you know, this person really wants to be supportive of me. But I have to actually start getting real with myself and be like, you know, if I keep doing this, like I'm going to live out my entire relationships just, but like, you know, like talking about them to my friends, you know, not actually like living them with all these like people who are like not showing up for me. But some of my friends really surprised me and they actually got their shit together too. And we ended up, you know, reconnecting like 6 months later, being like, holy crap, we're both in these better places now, you know? And so then you get to a point where you're really taking those positive friendships that you've managed to create for yourself and holding your romantic relationships to the same standards and basically saying, you know, if this person doesn't treat me as well as my friends treat me, then it's not worth it. Then it's not the kind of relationship that I want to be in. So, so it is what it is. So that's how I think you start creating those pockets of safety, is that you do notice the red flags earlier and earlier. And there's certainly people that I look at in my social circles right now that I'm like, I would not get involved with that person. And then I see another person getting involved with that person and I'm like, oh, yep, they treated them like shit. I am not surprised, you know, but I don't need, but I now have a feeling of safety in my body that comes from my own ability to practice discernment because I've been practicing discernment, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I think there has to come a time where we recognize that we don't live in a safe world. We don't live in a safe planet necessarily. And we see that every day. We see evidence of that every single day. But we also can't live in fear. And we get more safety by creating it for ourselves than we do by like being terrified and paranoid of the world. Of course, it's important to look out for red flags. Of course, there are people that we are going to want to avoid. Of course, we should be trusting our intuition when we come across someone who's not treating us well, and leave that. But, you know, it gets to a point where, you know, it got to a point for me where, like, when I was in New York, my story was all like, why are people treating me so badly? I don't understand why this is happening. I'm so good to people. How could they possibly take advantage of me like this? And now in my life, that narrative doesn't have a hold on me anymore. My narrative that I now have is, you must be this tall to ride. And if you come at me with energy that's not that tall, if you come at me with energy that's here, where, you know, you're going to try and fuck me over in the ways that I've been fucked over before, she's like, I don't even take that personally. I'm just like, are you crazy? what? You know, like there's a song that I wrote that really helped me get into this mindset because someone was trying to cheat on their girlfriend with me. And in the past, I would have been so like, oh, I'm tormented. Like, I'm so tempted. I want to do this, but whatever. And, you know, finally I was just like, no, this is bad. I'm just going to write a song where I say no to this person. And there's a verse in it that's like, are you insane? Boy, are you touched? Now, did you really think this through? That you could wave your magic wand and baby, I'd give in to you. What did you think? What do you feel? And what do you want me to say when saying trust no motherfucker is how I'm alive today? And so that imbuing myself, like singing that over and over again, it's like what the comedian, you know, Hannah Gadsby was saying about she has to quit comedy because every night during her shows she was talking about her trauma and making it into a punchline, and she was reliving the trauma without transmuting it. And so for me, being a songwriter, that was an opportunity to, you know, to rewrite my narrative and rewrite my story and have that be my thing now. So now someone tries to come at me and take advantage of me, and I'm just like, are you insane? Boy, are you touched? You know, like that's what I think now. Like, are you fucking crazy? Like, I'm not doing that, you know? And there might be, you know, there might be that like adrenaline reaction. There might be that like, oh my gosh, something's coming up, but it's like, I can, you know, I get out of that much more easily. I don't get tangled in that. I'm just like, no, get off me, you know, which is so much better than being like, oh, if I'm just nice to you, like you'll like me too. And oh no, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? So it really is, you know, creating safety for yourself is really about creating discernment. And again, it sucks, but nobody is going to do it for you. You know, it's people, like, we live in a society where there are parasites. There are people who will take advantage of you. We're learning that every day. And the most that we can do is protect ourselves with our own discernment. Go where we're loved. You know, it's okay to not trust everyone right at the beginning. It's okay to, you know, you don't want to lash out at people. You don't want to blame them for stuff that other people have done, but it's okay to not open up to people that fast. I take a fuck ton of time to open up to people in my personal life. Like, you know, it's like, it's almost like a joke with people like that, how like, you know, like how difficult it is to get close to me, you know? And I'm like, I'm okay with that because I'm also discerning. I'm not going to be mean to you. I'm just not immediately going to let you in until, you know, until I've really seen that you are this tall to ride, you know. And once we've had one of those difficult conversations, or once you've proven to me that you're going to be here for me, or, you know, once we've been, you know, I've known you for a little while and you're like, you're consistent with me and you show up and you return texts and you do things when you say you're going to, then great. Then there's, you know, the key to trust is time and consistency. And it's totally okay not to trust everyone up front. As long as you don't use that as a justification for like being mean to them, it's okay to be private. It's okay to take your own personal space and to create that feeling of safety for yourself with your own discernment, as long as you can do that and still be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any practices you like? Yeah.
Like physical practices like yoga, or like
Yeah, like practices or things to incorporate into your like living routine to like bring yourself back to yourself, to your body, and to find that safety. Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty bad about practices. I'm super terrible at them because again, I'm super left brained. So a lot of my teachers have talked about, you know, the benefits of having like a physical practice and everything. And I don't blame them. I think they're probably right. It's just not a, it's not a, it's not a habit I have had the bandwidth to incorporate as of this time, because I am undergoing so many other changes. However, I would say, I don't know that I recommend this as a practice for everybody, but it certainly helps me. I vomit my issues all over Facebook all the time. You know, I do it in a way that is constructive because I don't want to rant or spew negativity all over my social media. I don't think that would be good for me. I don't think it would be good for my followers. But if I am going through something and I need to process and I need accountability, I will absolutely sit there and I will write something Sometimes it just comes, sometimes I'm not even thinking about it. It's not an effort, which is why, again, this is easy for me because I'm that left brain person and I deal so much with language. And that's how I process, is by talking things out or writing things out. I'm also a Gemini rising. So, so that happens to be what I do. That's really helped me because it's helped me to, when I'm witnessed in a feeling or an emotion, and when I'm witnessed in saying, I'm going to change X, Y, Z, then it helps me stay accountable to myself. It helps that change be solidified. Even if people are just commenting and being like, hooray, go you, do it, you go girl, or whatever. It helps. It really helps solidify that decision, because now I've said it in public and there's no taking it back. But it's actually at a point where I don't even have to think that way anymore. It just happens, it just unfolds in that way. And at the same time, if I frame it in the right way, if I take whatever negativity I'm experiencing and I transmute it and say, here's what I'm dealing with and here's how I'm going to solve it. Or, I don't know how I'm going to solve it yet. Do any of you have suggestions? This is what I'm feeling right now and I want to move forward, or whatever. If you just take it and you make sure that you're transmuting it and making it solution oriented, then of course you're also helping people along the way. And it's also helpful for me because it's like, wow, now the book that I want to write about this is like practically written. It's like almost all my Facebook posts. I just basically have to, put them in order and teach people how to do what I did. And also, I was able to help people and to show them what's possible. And in a weird way, like by being so transparent about my own process, even though I did it for myself and my own healing, I wasn't really trying to market myself as a coach at the time. I was honestly just kind of like healing blindly. I was just like doing what felt like it was working. A lot of people have found my work that way, because and my clients have a level of trust for me if they've read my journey and they've read what I've been through, because they know that I've been there. They know that I've done this in myself, and I'm not coming at them from some superior position of being like, hello, I'm your therapist and I have my degree. They know that that I'm doing it, that I'm working with them because I've done it myself. So not everybody can be as transparent as I was. I understand that is in many ways a function of privilege. In many ways, it's a function of just not giving a fuck and not letting anything get in the way of my healing. In which case, transparency was really the best route for me. Thank God it actually worked in my favor. I don't know what I would have done if I'd oh gosh, what if I had some job where I wasn't allowed to say half the shit I wanted to say? I probably just would have had to quit, but for me, that definitely worked. So as transparent as someone feels that they are able to be, whether that's with their social media, whether it's with a support group. There's plenty of anonymous support groups out there. I know people who've also done their work through AA, through NA, through plenty of other places. But wherever you can tell your story and process through things and have accountability, for me, that was the biggest thing that propelled me forward on that journey, and really made those changes that I was making solidified within my body.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great tip.
Thank you.
Yeah, transmute that pain, be transparent. Yeah, be honest about it, be real, and don't be afraid to just, be authentic about what's really true, what's hard, and also what it takes to move through it. I think that's a great message, because a lot of people feel like they can't share what's really going on and put up these facades or pretend that, whatever.
Yeah. One of the things that's one of my biggest pet peeves is people in the witchcraft community, especially you get this with the LA goths, some of the LA kind of the wannabe witches. And I don't want to be mean, because everyone's at a certain point on their path. And I really honor and embrace everyone embracing their power and moving forward. And even if they're doing it wrong, I don't expect them to get it right, immediately. So whatever calls their power back is positive. But I do have to I look sometimes at the posts that people will make, and they'll be their post will be I'm a powerful witch, don't fuck with me. And I'm bro, you've posted this like 3 times in the past month. If you're so powerful, why do people keep fucking with you? You know, that there's this fronting going on. There's this like, I'm this and I'm whatever. And I'm like, don't fuck with me because I'm going to hex you or whatever. And I'm like, why don't you just admit that you're in pain? Why don't you admit that it sucks that people are hurting you, that people are trying to betray you? Why don't you sit and say like, how is this happening to me right now? What do I need to do to fix this? You know, that's where your real power is going to come from. In a weird way too, you know, I was a pro dom when I was in New York. I was a pro dom for about 4 years, and I would see the same thing happen in the pro doms who would come into the industry. Is the first thing that they would want to do is they'd want to be like, I'm a big badass dom and ain't nobody fucking with me or whatever. But what this led to was actually an inability to work on their education as players, you know, to work on their skill sets, to work on playing safely or being able to know what they were doing. And you know, I got made fun of in the beginning when I started my pro dom career because I kind of like admitted that I didn't know jack shit. You know, like I made it very like I cited my sources. I was like, you know, I was like, I got made fun of because I was like, well, I've read Jay Wiseman say in SM 101, you know, and people are like, oh my God, you look like such a fucking amateur. Get off the fucking forums, Arden. Like you're embarrassing yourself. But you know what I did is within 6 months time, I had sought out mentors. You know, I went and took a Midori's rope dojo because I decided I wanted rope bondage to like be my thing. You know, we hired Lee Harrington, who is the author of Shibari You Can Use, you know, like rope bondage, to come and teach classes at the house where I worked. I taught, you know, I convinced my boss slash boyfriend at the time to start bringing in outside educators to, you know, to help the DOMs at our house like learn better skill sets. I'm like, you know, for the price of like one session, you could get, you know, a class to have everyone have like, you know, be able to, like everyone in our house be able to like do fire play or like, you know, more advanced stuff. And we're going to get a reputation for having, you know, educated DOMs. And we did. And then all of a sudden, like, you know, like 6 months to a year into my career, people were like, holy shit, okay, she knows what she's doing now. And actually, she knows what she's doing more than all those other DOMs who started off just being like, I'm a badass, I know everything, because she actually took the time to get a legitimate, bona fide BDSM education, you know? And, you know, for all the like trauma that came out of my DOM years and everything, like I still look back at that and I'm very proud of what I did in the scene at the time, because my education, my being transparent about my educating myself actually made other people step up their game as well. And there were other DOMs who were all of a sudden like, oh, we're going to fly out to San Francisco to take an intensive with on piercing with Fakir Musafar and whatever. And it's like, if I hadn't done that, you know, you might still be fronting or whatever. So that's like, it's just a big pet peeve of mine is people who front like they're powerful when they're not willing to do the work. You know, it's like my work speaks for itself. Do I come on and brag about how powerful I am sometimes? Maybe if I'm in the mood for it, you know, whatever, but that's not, I don't expect people to just believe me sight unseen. My proof is in the fact that, you know, that I turned myself into a serious musical artist. My proof is in the fact that I'm creating a business that is all my own, that I'm, you know, setting myself up for a life that I love. My proof is that, you know, I was able to, you know, use a spell to call in my magical mentor of choice, who I had never even, you know, met or had any friends in common with that I knew of, you know, before I cast it or whatever. It's like when you're getting results, you don't need to like brag about it, you know? So yeah, I would definitely say that, you know, no matter what, regardless of how transparent you're comfortable being with online, at the very least, like don't front. Fronting is like, the energy of fronting will actually halt your growth, you know, because you're not allowing yourself to be real with yourself. So if people take away anything, you know, I certainly hope they take away that. Just look at these posts sometimes, you know, I'm a powerful badass witch, don't you dare fuck with me. I'm like, really? That sounds like an invitation. You know, you're not even advanced enough in your craft to understand that the universe doesn't understand negatives, and that when you're saying don't fuck with me, you're really saying fuck with me. But you know, but I'm asleep. So yeah, so you know, you just try not to get involved in that kind of stuff anymore. And again, that's also a sign of growth. It's like when stuff annoys you about the things that you're seeing, it's just because you're going to the next level. So it's like, I also see and receive all of that with love and gratitude too. I'm like, all right, y'all are on your path, have fun.
Yeah, so you brought up a really interesting topic, and this could be a whole other conversation and can of worms. But like the relationship between BDSM and trauma healing. Do you have any advice or just comments on that?
Oh my gosh. My own experience. Like, I'm so biased. So I want to present this with an understanding that BDSM is not always unhealthy. And that, I don't condemn it in any way. There are plenty of people who seem to be creating relationships that work for them, and everyone has a different path. All of that said, for me, um, I came to a point where I realized that my sexual orientation as kinky, as specifically a submissive masochist, was 100% enabling my codependency and my desensitization. Because I justified my codependency by saying, I will do whatever this person tells me to because I'm kinky. It's not a problem. It's my sexual orientation. I am kinky. So don't kink shame me. This is a choice. I'm consenting to this because it's a choice. But it wasn't a choice. It was an addiction. It was an addiction to surrender. And I only recognized it as such when I met someone who was an alcoholic, who was 2 months into his own sobriety, who told me a story about when he was, he said, he was like, gosh, this was such a profound moment. He goes, I could have 1 drink and be fine. I could have 3 drinks and be fine. I could have 5 drinks and be fine. But one night I'm not going to stop at 5. And I'm going to wake up 3 days later, just having gone on a crazy bender, all my credit cards maxed out, contracts broken, flights missed, and I'm going to wake up passed out in the snow. And I don't know when I'm going to be fine and when I'm going to wake up passed out in the snow. And when I originally responded to this story, and this is what's so beautifully fucked up and ironic about this for me, is that I was doing that thing where I establish rapport with someone because I want them to like me. And so one of the things that I unconsciously do now that I had, from my years as a dating coach and from my years studying NLP, that I had sort of like unconsciously slipped into my conversational repertoire, is that when someone opens up to me with a vulnerable share, I try to mirror them, to some extent. I don't play like, oh, well, I get how you feel because, whatever, like, I'm not trying to make false equivalencies. I make that very clear. And and what I responded in this instance was I said, I feel like in a way I can relate to that feeling. I have not had a problem with substance abuse exactly. So I'm sure I can't imagine what you've been going through. But for me, when I was in a relationship, specifically a BDSM relationship, and I was submissive, someone could say, someone could tell me to give them a foot rub. I could give someone a foot rub and be fine. I could make someone dinner and be fine. I could hand over my entire sexual agency for a whole weekend and let them do whatever they want to me and still be fine. But one day I'm not going to stop there. One day they're going to come home and say, I need $25,000 to stay out of jail. And I'm going to give it to them. And then I'm going to financially support them for a year until they end up choking me against a wall, because I'm not going to know, because I'm not going to say no. And at the time I wasn't even thinking about it when I said that. And this person turned to me and goes, wow, yeah, wow, that's exactly the same thing. And I was like, holy shit, it is, isn't it? Fuck. And identifying as a masochist allowed me to take this narrative where I was completely desensitized to pain in my own body, and to spin a story where it was like my superpower, where I was like, but I can have a lover put out a lit cigarette on my nipple and do that for them because I don't feel pain. So there's beauty in this, taking all of this desensitization that I've experienced and the fact that I can't feel my body. I can now use that for someone else's pleasure, which maybe both of those things would have been okay if I had ever found a partner who actually appreciated these things in me, wanted to keep me safe, didn't want to push me into a point where I was, waking up passed out in the snow, or, waking up, $25,000 poorer and, with their hands around my neck, being choked against a wall after financially supporting them for a year. If I had ever had a partner who actually was responsible at practicing discernment for me, then maybe it would have been okay. Maybe I would have found a relationship where my service and my sacrifice and my masochism was honored and was valued. But that didn't happen. And part of me feels like it didn't happen because it was my destiny to transmute this. It was my destiny to understand all this and change it for myself. And part of me believes it didn't happen because I wasn't in a place where I could attract someone who would practice discernment for me responsibly, because I could not practice discernment responsibly for myself. It's like I couldn't even discern which partners could practice discernment for me responsibly, because I couldn't practice discernment among my partners, if that makes sense. Now I look back and I wonder, and I'm like, if I ever wanted to get into BDSM again, now that I have discernment and I have boundaries, could I get back into that safely? Will I be like the alcoholic forever who just doesn't ever touch a drop of alcohol again? Or will I be like, the anorexic who can, or like, I guess more to the, I guess the better metaphor would be the bulimic who can like eat just enough food and not so much food that they compel themselves to throw up or whatever. Where is my nourishment here sexually? And I don't know the answer to that yet, but one thing that keeps coming back for me is that if I've healed my codependence, I won't really need my submission, because my submission functioned as a way of keeping me safe from abandonment and from rejection, because it was absolutely a coping mechanism that said, I need a man in this world to keep me safe from other men. And the best thing I can do is maybe try and find a good one, and hand over all my power and all my authority. And because I'm tired of protecting this body by myself. I'm exhausted having to set my own boundaries because people keep eroding them. People keep trampling them down. And I don't know how to keep them up for myself. So if I just find someone else to do it for me, then all my problems will be solved. So it's kind of like, I don't think I'm going to need it in the future. It's like, once I solved my core wound, it was like that need went away, that need to submit and surrender. It's like, well, if I'm practicing discernment anyway, then surrender doesn't actually feel as good as it used to. I used to get off on being hurt. I used to get off on the deeper my surrender, the deeper my sacrifice was, because I felt that correlated to the degree that I loved someone, that I was willing to suffer for them. And that if I was willing to suffer for them, I mean, that in itself, Jesus, fuck, I can't believe I was letting that belief run my life, but that if I were, that if that happened and I proved my love for them, then they would keep me safe. Obviously that was a faulty algorithm. So I'm obviously pretty biased about BDSM. I see people now who purport to heal trauma through BDSM reenactment. I think that is super dangerous, but I also recognize where I'm biased and I haven't looked into that work so much. So I don't really want to look into it. It doesn't feel particularly pleasant for me, but I do recognize that who knows, maybe it is helpful for some people. If there's people out there doing it, maybe it's working for them. But for me, I think the really important lesson about trauma and BDSM was that our sexualities can serve as another way of enabling our coping mechanisms. And for me in particular, it was like, our sexual freedom is supposed to be sacred. It's supposed to be our temple, It's supposed to be the thing that you don't touch. It's supposed to be the thing that you don't judge people for. If you're gay, if you're kinky, if you're whatever you're into in our community, you are really not supposed to judge people for that, because that is very, very toxic and people will call out kink shaming on you. So my demons were really smart. My friend's demons, my friend who was the alcoholic, his demons were, in my observation, his demons were coarser and more immediate and created more of a scene, and had him like passed out in the snow. My demons hid where they knew that no one would hunt them down. They went into the sanctuary of sexual freedom and said, you can't touch me here. we're going to live here where you can't kink shame me. And I had to, that's one of the things that I've started saying regularly is make sure on your healing process that you are checking your temples for termites. You can have a lot of shit hide where you think it's safe, where your issues will think it's safe. And, you cannot lawyer your way out of fate. You cannot just, you can't, it's like, Sleeping Beauty, they said, she's going to prick her finger on a spindle when she's 16 years old and she's going to fall into a deep sleep or whatever. And the king and queen thought, oh, well, we'll just get rid of all the spindles. That'll do it. No, you can't lawyer your way out of solving your issues by changing your external circumstances to adapt to them. Sadly, it would be great if we could. Maybe it wouldn't, but for me, that's certainly the biggest lesson that I learned about BDSM is that anything, absolutely anything can be your drug. Absolutely anything can enable your coping mechanisms. And so for me, getting out of that and actually holding myself accountable to the results I was creating in my life and realizing how much I was using BDSM to excuse my submissive, surrendered, codependent behavior. Wow, it's embarrassing now that I look back at it,
Wow.
I know it's a lot. It's a lot. But I also I don't want to kink shame either. And if there are people who are able to make that work for them, then that's their path, I would just ask people to really look at that because, I had a relationship where the fantasy of the relationship was that I was this person's sex doll. And I was treated exactly like a sex doll. I never met any of his friends, he used me when he wanted to use me. And when he was done with me, he discarded me. And then I acted surprised about it, So I'm like, the stories we tell, the fantasies we tell can come true. And that is the meaning also, behind narrative magic, behind the hypersigil. The stories that we tell come true. My previous album before I released Who Can You Trust was called It Looks Like Trouble. And it was. It looked like trouble and it was. and it was bad, And so I think it's just really important to really look at the stories that we're creating in our lives. If you have a BDSM relationship that works for you, great. Then it's possible that you are getting off on stories that are healthier for you. I changed my own narrative I had to consciously, really a big core part of my trauma healing journey was I am changing my core sexual fantasy narrative from master slave into king and queen. I may still want to defer most of the decisions, to the king, but I'm the queen. A, I'm protected, and B, I have a voice, I get to speak to the king, my husband, behind closed doors and tell him what I think about the policies that he's running and whatever. And I can, object or whatever. And if he's smart, he'll listen to me. I was like, I need to start making that the fantasy narrative that I hold my relationships up to. Someone whose leadership I trust, someone who I chose as my partner in leading my kingdom, someone who I trust to do that, not someone where I'm in a dungeon, even though it fucking feels like it, it feels like being in a dungeon when you grow up with childhood trauma and someone rescues you and just, uses you for whatever you're good for. I had to change my story. Sometimes I feel like that could be a whole new therapy modality, is just like changing the stories of our fantasies, changing the narratives that drive our lives forward. How do we, hi Virgil. How do we tell better stories that contribute to our empowerment and our healing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and stories about where we're going, not just rewriting the past, but totally telling a new story about where we can go from here.
Exactly. And I think that's also what it means when we say don't let the past define you, to realize that you don't have to live in that same story forever. When I was with my ex, the tragic thing about that relationship ending when he discarded me was, at the time, I was like, this is as good as it gets, because this person understands me and this person accepts me for my core wound and allows me to still be loved in all of my brokenness, Of course, I wasn't really loved. I was treated very poorly. But at the time, I was like, this is as good as it gets, because someone recognizes where I have this wound and why I feel the need to behave in a certain way to hand over all my agency and let them make decisions, and to just treat me like a very high-end sex doll because of what my past is. No one had ever understood that about me before, and this person really immediately got me. He'd actually even created a story. He'd created a TV show that was based around around that premise. And he shared it with me, and when I watched it, I was just like, holy shit, this is me. This is you get me entirely. And I believed at that point, which is why it was so hard for me to move on from that breakup. I believed that was it, that was the best I could do. And so, like, of course, I was like, anything that was in front of me after that looked like it's just not going to be as good as this relationship with someone who got me at this level. Nobody else is ever going to understand, And I told him, like, when we broke up, I was like, how do you think I fucking feel knowing that any person I date from here on out, when they ask me about my sexuality, I'm going to have to show them your fucking TV show, and it's not true anymore because I healed it, But at the time I thought it was, because I thought I would just have to cope with my core wound forever. And I didn't know what it would look like when I started healing. But again, the power of intention setting, I said, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I asked the universe, I just said, just send me the right person. Just send me the right person. And sure enough, all my issues came up. Everything was quite clearly illuminated for me to be able to solve. And now I feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm nearing the end of that journey. I feel like, probably by, now it's sort of like I'm working on creating sustainability in my art and my business, and setting myself up the way that I wish I would have had I not prioritized, everyone else's priorities over my own. Even when I thought that I wasn't, even when I thought I was living my best life, I was still being completely reactive to the people that I was trying to incentivize to not abandon me. So now I feel pretty good. And now it's like, I am still, I am still working on that, but I feel really confident that, that the next relationship that I get into is going to be able to be the real deal because of that, because I have, done all of this work on myself that I didn't realize I had to do. And now I want nothing to do. I want nothing to do with anything that looks like that last relationship at all. But I couldn't see at the time how fucked up it was, because I was so in my core wound. And I thought it's okay. Like, this is good. This is fucked up because I'm fucked up, and someone accepts me for how fucked up I am. And this is as good as it gets. This is me being loved in all my brokenness. And clearly life had a different path for me, which I'm very, very grateful for, especially since that person has no career anymore. That was mean of me, but sometimes I have to allow myself to be where I'm at on my journey and feel a smug sense of satisfaction, about that. Hopefully everyone heals, everyone gets better, and there will be no more snark. I'm looking forward to a snark-free future.
Your kitty is so cute, by the way.
Oh, thank you. He's very helpful. He's my little familiar. Actually, that's another really good tip, is if to, looking to get back in your body. If you have a pet that's really, our pets are so, just so pure and so kind, and they love us so unconditionally, as long as we feed them, right? You get mad when in fact, probably right now you're doing this because you're hungry, and you recognize that I'm, on an interview right now, and you're like, well, I'll just wait. I'll just be really cute, so you'll feed me afterwards. And I will, I promise. But they love us so much, and that feeling of being safe in our bodies. What's really beautiful is I read this article once about how we don't think about this, but we're so ourselves in front of our pets. Like, we get out of the shower and like wrap ourselves in a towel, and our pets, that we're not weird about the fact that our pets are like looking at us when we're naked. We will talk to them, we'll sing to them, we'll whatever. Like, we feel so safe with our pets, and that's a really great way to tune into that energy. And because like, wouldn't you love to be with a partner one day where you could just step out of the shower and be naked around them and who cares? And you could just like sing to your cat, like while your partner's there hanging out with you, and you just feel so comfortable and uncensored, and you can like just, you know, talk to yourself or whatever it is. So that's another, you know, very grateful to you, Virgil. You've really been a very integral part of my healing process. And I will give you that validation on screen. That's right. Can you say hi to the people? Can you say hi to the people? You've done a great job. You're an excellent little healer. Yes, you are.
So
Yeah.
adorable. Well, do you want to say any last words about your program before we wrap? Or
I feel pretty good. I feel like I got that out when we kind of did the first like sort of the almost wrap the first time, and who knows, you know, you might be able to divide this up into 2 episodes or what have you. You know, so people can digest it easier, or you know, it's up to you. But I feel good. I feel like we covered a lot, and yeah, it feels like a very useful talk. And I understand that. I hope this was clear. You know, sometimes I've done this work so quickly, you know, I've really like fast tracked myself so much that sometimes there's so much information I'm holding at one time that like a lot of it comes out. And I am a Gemini, so I'm Gemini rising, so I'm super talkative. So, so thank you again. And I hope it was clearly organized enough that it all made sense. Still working on that part. That's what my course takes 8 weeks.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. So much awesome information in here, and I think it'll help so many, and so glad I got to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. This is really a pleasure. It helps me too. It helps me really clarify my thoughts and, you know, and gain the confidence that I need to lead the group that's ahead of me. And so I feel really good too. I'm really grateful that you reached out, and I hope that everything is going great with you too, and with your business and with your clients. And you know, we're our work that we're doing in the world right now is it's definitely really needed. So I see you and I appreciate you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.